The mist hung low over the Normandy fields on the morning of June 19, 1944. 13 days after the Allied landings, the hedgerow country had become a grinding maze of ambush and attrition. Every stone wall concealed a rifle. Every farmhouse might hide a machine gun nest or nothing at all. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber stood at the edge of a dirt road, watching his men fan out toward a 2-story farmhouse with faded blue shutters. His boots were caked with mud from the overnight march. His uniform, once pressed to regulation standard, now bore the creases and stains of a commander who had not slept indoors in 8 days. Weber commanded a reduced company of the 352nd Infantry Division. They had been pulled back from the coastal defences after suffering 40% casualties in the first 72 hours of the invasion. Now they were tasked with holding a sector southwest of Carentan, a position the High Command described as vital and which Weber knew to be untenable. The farmhouse sat alone in a shallow valley. No smoke rose from the chimney. No animals moved in the yard. The silence was too complete. Weber raised his hand. The advance stopped. He had learned to distrust silence. His second-in-command, Oberleutnant Krause, moved up beside him. Krause was 23 years old, a former law student from Heidelberg, and he carried a Mauser rifle with the careful precision of someone who had never fired it before the invasion. "Could be abandoned," Krause said quietly. "Could be," Weber replied. He did not believe it. He signaled 2 men forward. They moved in practiced bounds, covering each other across the open ground. One reached the door. The other took position at the window. Weber watched through his binoculars, counting heartbeats. The door opened. Nothing happened. The scout waved them forward. Weber led the company in. They moved through the farmyard, rifles raised, boots crunching on gravel. The air smelled of wet earth and something older, something chemical. Weber recognized it, the faint residue of cordite. Someone had fired a weapon here recently. Inside, the farmhouse was dark, furniture overturned, a table on its side. Broken dishes scattered across the floor. The soldiers spread through the rooms, checking corners, opening doors. Weber climbed the narrow staircase, his hand on the grip of his Luger. The upper floor was empty except for one room. At the end of the hallway, a door stood half open. Weber approached it slowly. He could hear breathing now, shallow and irregular. He pushed the door wider with the barrel of his pistol. A girl sat in the corner. She was perhaps 14 years old, thin, with dark hair tangled around her face. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on the doorway. She did not move. She did not speak. Weber holstered his weapon. "Krause," he called down the stairs, "get up here." The girl flinched at the sound of his voice. Krause appeared a moment later, followed by 2 enlisted men. They stopped in the doorway, staring. "Sir," Krause began, "the rest of the house is clear. No enemy presence, no—" "Get these men out," Weber said. Krause hesitated. "Sir?" "Out, now." The 2 soldiers exchanged glances. One of them, a corporal named Dietrich, stepped forward. He was older than the others, perhaps 35, with a face weathered by years of labor before the war. He had been a factory foreman in Essen. "Hauptmann," Dietrich said slowly, "this is a combat zone. We need to secure the—" "I gave you an order." Dietrich did not move. His jaw tightened. "Sir, protocol requires—" Weber turned to face him fully. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "Leave the girl alone." The words hung in the narrow hallway like a physical presence. Dietrich's eyes narrowed. He looked at the girl, then back at Weber. Something passed between them, some unspoken calculation. Then Dietrich turned and walked away. His boots echoed down the stairs. Krause stood frozen, unsure. "You too," Weber said. Krause left. Weber remained in the doorway. He did not enter the room. He could see the girl's chest rising and falling too quickly, the way her fingers gripped the fabric of her dress. She was trying not to cry, trying not to make a sound. He took a step back. "You are safe," he said in French. His accent was thick but clear. "No one will hurt you." The girl said nothing. Weber reached into his pack and pulled out a tin of rations. He set it on the floor, just inside the doorway, and stepped back again. "Stay here," he said. "Do not come downstairs until we are gone." He closed the door. The company assembled in the farmyard. 27 men, most of them under 25 years old. They had been farmers, clerks, apprentices. Now they carried rifles and entrenching tools and the hollow-eyed exhaustion of soldiers who had learned too quickly what war actually meant. Weber stood near the well, studying his map. The terrain was a patchwork of fields and hedgerows, each one a potential kill box. Intelligence reported American patrols moving east from Carentan. His orders were to delay any advance and fall back to the secondary line if overwhelmed. It was the kind of order designed to absolve the High Command of responsibility when the inevitable happened. Kraus approached him, lowering his voice. "Sir, the men are asking about the girl." Weber did not look up from the map. "What about her? They want to know what we're doing with her." "We are doing nothing with her." "Some of them think—" Kraus stopped, searching for the right words. "Think what?" "That we should bring her with us, for questioning. She might have information about partisan activity." Weber folded the map. "She is a child. She has no information. Dietrich believes—" "I do not care what Dietrich believes." Kraus shifted his weight. He was young, but he was not stupid. He understood the fault lines running through the company, the tension between doctrine and discretion, between obedience and survival. "Sir," he said carefully, "if this gets reported, then it will be my responsibility. With respect, Hauptmann, it is not that simple. The men—" Weber turned to face him. "The men will do as they are ordered. That is the only thing that is simple." He walked away before Kraus could respond. Weber had joined the Wehrmacht in 1936, an officer candidate drawn more by tradition than ideology. His father had served in the Great War, his grandfather in the Wars of Unification. The military was a family inheritance, like a name or a plot of land. He had not questioned it then. He questioned it now. The invasion had stripped away the abstractions. There were no glorious advances, no clean victories, only hedgerows and mud and the smell of burnt flesh, and orders that made less sense with each passing day. 2 days prior, Weber's company had been tasked with holding a crossroads near Saint-Jean-de-Day. They had dug in, positioned their single PaK-40 anti-tank gun, and waited. The Americans came in force. 2 Sherman tanks, infantry support, coordinated mortar fire. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. Weber lost 6 men and the PaK gun. They retreated under cover of smoke, dragging their wounded. No reinforcements arrived. No air support materialized. The High Command issued a commendation for their stubborn defense. Weber had stopped reading commendations. He circled the farmhouse, checking sightlines. The position was defensible for perhaps an hour, maybe 2 if the Americans approached cautiously. After that, they would be flanked or shelled into submission. He found Dietrich near the barn, smoking a cigarette. The corporal straightened when Weber approached, but he did not salute. "Hauptmann," Dietrich said evenly. "Corporal." They stood in silence for a moment. Dietrich took a long drag on his cigarette, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The girl," Dietrich said finally. "You made a decision. I gave an order. Some of the men do not understand it. They do not need to understand. They need to obey." Dietrich smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That is what they told us in Poland. In Russia, obey, do not question, and look where it brought us." Weber felt the weight of his pistol on his hip. "Are you questioning my authority, Corporal?" "I am questioning your priorities, sir." "Explain." Dietrich flicked the cigarette away. "We are losing this war. We have lost men, equipment, ground. Every day we retreat. Every day we are told to hold positions we cannot hold, to fight enemies we cannot defeat. And in the middle of this, you stop everything to protect one French girl. She is a civilian. So were the ones in Russia. So were the ones in Poland. Did you stop for them? The question landed like a blow. Weber said nothing. Dietrich stepped closer, lowering his voice. I have followed your orders, Hauptmann. I have done what you asked. But do not expect me to believe this is about morality. We passed that line a long time ago. Then what is it about? Survival, control, keeping the men focused. And right now, they are wondering why their commander cares more about a stranger than about them. Weber met his gaze. If I have to explain that to them, then we have already lost. Dietrich held his stare for a long moment, then he turned and walked away. The radio crackled to life at 1400 hours, battalion headquarters, requesting a status update. Weber took the handset from the operator, a thin boy named Hoffmann who looked like he should still be in school. Einheit Weber, reporting. The voice on the other end was clipped, impatient. Major Stein, the battalion operations officer, a man Weber had met exactly twice, both times in a command bunker far from the front. Hauptmann Weber, your last report was 6 hours ago. We require current disposition and enemy contact. Weber glanced at the map. Position secure. No enemy contact. Awaiting further orders. Understood. Be advised. Reconnaissance reports American movement in your sector. Estimated company strength. Mechanized support. You are to hold until relieved. When will relief arrive, sir? A pause. Static hissed through the line. That information is not available at this time. Sir, with respect, we do not have the strength to hold against mechanized infantry. I have 27 men and no anti-tank capability. Your orders are clear, Hauptmann. My orders will get my men killed for no strategic gain. Another pause, longer this time. Hauptmann Weber, the voice said coldly, you will hold your position. If you abandon it without authorization, you will be subject to court-martial. Do you understand? Weber stared at the radio. He thought of the hedgerows, the mud, the girl in the upstairs room. I understand, sir. Good. Battalion out. The line went dead. Weber handed the radio back to Hoffmann. The boy's hands were shaking. Are we staying, sir? Hoffmann asked quietly. For now. But if the Americans come... If the Americans come, we follow the withdrawal plan. Pack your equipment. Be ready to move in 10 minutes. Hoffmann's eyes widened. But the orders? You let me worry about the orders. Weber walked back to the farmhouse. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the yard. In a few hours it would be dark. Dark was better. Dark meant they could move without being seen from the air, could slip through the hedgerows and reach the secondary line before dawn. But first, he had to deal with the girl. He climbed the stairs again. The hallway was dim, the light from the window fading. He knocked softly on the door. No answer. He opened it. The girl was sitting in the same position, the tin of rations untouched beside her. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time, he saw something other than fear in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or calculation. We are leaving soon, Weber said in French. You will be safe to leave after we are gone. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. Is there anyone? Family? Anyone who can help you? She shook her head. Weber felt the weight of that silence. He knew what it meant, knew what had likely happened to her family, her neighbors. The invasion had turned the entire countryside into a battlefield. Civilians were crushed between armies, their homes reduced to rubble, their lives erased by forces they could not control or comprehend. There is a village, he said, 3 kilometers west. There will be people there. Go at night. Stay off the roads. The girl stared at him. Do you understand? He asked again. Why? She said. It was the first word she had spoken. Weber crouched down, so his eyes were level with hers. Because you deserve to survive this. So do your soldiers. The observation struck him silent. She was right, of course. His men deserved to survive. They had been conscripted, thrown into a war they did not choose, ordered to fight for a cause many of them no longer believed in. And here he was, risking their discipline, their cohesion, for the sake of one girl. But that was the point, wasn't it? If he could not protect one person, what was the purpose of any of it? Yes, Weber said quietly. They do. He stood and left the room. The Americans arrived at 17:20 hours. They came from the east, moving in textbook formation, 2 squads, approximately 20 men, 1 Browning automatic rifle per squad, supported by a single M8 Greyhound armored car. They advanced cautiously, using the hedgerows for cover, leapfrogging from position to position. Weber watched them through his binoculars from the barn loft. Professional, methodical. They had learned the lessons of the hedgerows quickly. He turned to Kraus. "Well, how long to pack the equipment? 5 minutes? Maybe less. Do it, quietly." Kraus nodded and disappeared down the ladder. Weber watched the Americans continue their advance. They were still 400 meters out, moving slowly, checking every hedgerow. At this rate, they would reach the farmhouse in 20 minutes. He had 2 choices, fight and die, buying time for no one, or withdraw now, while the gap was still open. He chose survival. The company moved in silence, each man carrying only what he could run with. They left the heavy equipment, 2 crates of ammunition, 1 damaged MG-42, 3 entrenching tools hidden in the barn. They slipped out the back of the farmhouse, moving west through the fields, using the folds in the terrain to stay below the ridgeline. Weber was the last to leave. He paused at the base of the stairs, looking up toward the 2nd floor. The girl was still up there. He had told her to wait until they were gone. He hoped she would listen. He hoped she would survive. He closed the door behind him and followed his men into the fading light. They moved for 2 hours, covering nearly 6 kilometers through the hedgerow country. The night was moonless, the air thick with moisture. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of equipment, the rasp of breathing, the distant rumble of artillery on the horizon. No one spoke. Weber led them to a predetermined rally point, an abandoned mill beside a narrow stream. The building was half collapsed, its roof open to the sky, but it offered concealment and a clean line of retreat if needed. The men dropped their packs and collapsed against the walls. Some drank from their canteens. Others simply stared into the darkness, too exhausted to move. Weber posted sentries and checked his map by the light of a shielded torch. The secondary line was another 8 kilometers west. They could reach it by dawn if they maintained the pace. Kraus sat down beside him. "We made it. We retreated. We survived." Weber folded the map. "Battalion will want an explanation. Let them come to the front and ask for one." Weber almost smiled. Dietrich approached them, his face unreadable in the darkness. "Hauptmann, may I speak freely? Have you ever done otherwise?" Dietrich did not rise to the bait. "You made the right call, withdrawing. The men know it. And the girl." Dietrich was quiet for a moment. "The men do not understand that. Do you?" "No, sir, but I think that is the point." Weber looked at him. "Explain." "You gave an order that made no tactical sense. It cost us nothing, gained us nothing. It was just a line, a place you refused to cross. And in a war like this, maybe that is the only thing that keeps us human." Weber said nothing. Dietrich straightened. "For what it is worth, Hauptmann, I will follow your orders, even the ones I do not understand." He walked away, leaving Weber alone with his thoughts. The company reached the secondary line at 5:30 hours on June 20th, 1944. They were met by a lieutenant from another unit, who directed them to a reserve trench 100 meters behind the main position. Hot food was waiting, watery soup and stale bread. The men ate in silence, too tired to speak. Weber reported to the battalion command post at 700. Major Stein was waiting, his uniform impeccable, his face tight with disapproval. "You withdrew without authorization," Stein said without preamble. I withdrew to preserve my command, Weber replied. Your orders were to hold. My orders were impossible. I had no anti-tank weapons, no reinforcements, and an enemy with overwhelming numerical superiority. Staying would have accomplished nothing except the death of 27 men. Stein leaned forward. That is not your decision to make, Hauptmann. With respect, sir, it is exactly my decision to make. I command those men. Their lives are my responsibility. Your responsibility is to follow orders. Weber met his gaze. Then perhaps the orders should be worth following. The room went silent. Stein's face flushed. You are dangerously close to insubordination, Hauptmann. I am dangerously close to honesty, sir. Stein stood abruptly. Get out, before I have you arrested. Weber saluted and left. He knew it would not end there. There would be reports, inquiries, consequences. But he also knew that the front was collapsing, that the entire Wehrmacht in Normandy was being ground to pieces, and that in the chaos of defeat, one captain's unauthorized withdrawal would be forgotten. He was wrong about that. 3 days later, Weber received new orders. He was being transferred to a reserve unit in the rear, effective immediately. It was a demotion in all but name, a way to remove him without the spectacle of a court-martial. Kraus found him packing his gear in the dugout. Sir, is it true? Yes. This is because of the withdrawal. Partly. And the girl? Weber looked at him. Does it matter? Kraus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The men wanted me to tell you something. What? That they would follow you again. Anywhere. Weber felt something tighten in his chest. He told them they should find a better commander. They think they already had one. Weber did not respond. He finished packing and slung his pack over his shoulder. As he walked out of the dugout, he passed Dietrich, who stood at attention and saluted. It was the first time Dietrich had saluted him since the farmhouse. Weber returned it. He never saw his company again. Records indicate that the unit was effectively destroyed in the fighting around St. Lo in mid-July. Of the 27 men who had withdrawn from the farmhouse, 11 survived the war. Kraus was killed by artillery fire on July 14th. Dietrich was captured by American forces on July 19th and spent the remainder of the war as a prisoner. Major Stein was killed in a traffic accident in 1947. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber lived until 1982. He worked as a school teacher in Bavaria, never married, and never spoke publicly about the war. Among his personal effects, found after his death, was a single photograph, a farmhouse with faded blue shutters, taken from a distance. On the back, in faded ink, were 4 words, "Leave the girl alone." No record exists of what happened to the girl. No name, no testimony, no confirmation that she survived the war. The farmhouse was destroyed in the fighting that followed. The village 3 kilometers west was abandoned. But in the official after-action reports filed by the American patrol that entered the farmhouse on June 19th, there is a single line buried among casualty figures and ammunition expenditures. Structure clear. No hostile forces. 1 civilian, juvenile female, found unharmed. That is all. History is not written by the victors or the defeated. It is written by those who survive long enough to bear witness. And sometimes, in the margins of official documents, between the numbers and the coordinates and the tactical assessments, there are stories that refuse to disappear. This is one of them. A German officer, in the middle of a war his nation was losing, in a moment when survival trumped morality, gave an order that shocked his own soldiers. Not because it was cruel, but because it was kind.